about 6 months. We had a
Marmot stealth mode.
Marmot stealth mode. For the last 6 months, we had some explaining to do. So what I'm going to do is just sort of explain how we got here, after which Casey is going to go on and explain what we've actually done. So the way we started, it was a series of very fortunate accidents combined with a bunch of absolutely incorrigible people and the internet. In that Casey was from the Netherlands, I live in London, and our third co-founder, Tyler, lives out in Canada. And unfortunately, he can't be here tonight. It's quite disappointing because he's kind of the common thread who actually brought the company together. Tyler is a quantum mathematician and utterly brilliant. And he was working through what was the best way to use a smart contract capable blockchain. So I'm not very good with microphones. So he was trying to figure out what's the best way to use a smart contract capable blockchain database. At the time, he was writing some of the most advanced contracts on the Ethereum chain. Some of you may remember Denny's Lotto back in the day.
Turn it up!
Does anyone know how this?
Rock and roll!
You have to push it. You have to hold it down.
You have to hold the thing down.
Yeah.
No.
No.
No, I'm off. I'm muted. Yeah.
This is absurd. Anyway, so I don't like it.
It might have been me.
For the recording.
Press the wait. It might have been me.
I think it could hear you anyway.
Okay. So basically, he was going through. He was writing these contracts, and one day in April, he invented a contract we call it Doug. And the reason we call it Doug is because Alice, Bob, and Carol were already taken. But the reason for it was that we were experimenting with many contracts, not one or two, or like 30. And the problem with that is that you can't hard code all of those into a blockchain. Or if you do, you're stuck with them for the rest of your life, warts and all. So, and unless you hard code the chain, and anyone who knows that, what that involves, it's a real pain in the neck. And Tyler figured that could be solved. So we did with Doug. And what Doug does is it tracks contracts, variables, anything else that a blockchain application is going to need in any part of the system, and such that any user that has the requisite permissions to prevent it is able to do so simply by signing a transaction with their private key. At the same time, Tyler and Casey were working on a program called C3D, which allowed you to track things which are off the chain, and also point to things which are off the chain. The example in that instance was BitTorrent, and as you'll hear about the server tonight, you can do it with a lot else as well. And for my part, I was looking at blockchains while a lawyer at Fulbright here in London very charitably indulged my interest in the subject. And I wasn't very comfortable with the idea that blockchains were forever destined to be used in less than legal applications. And I said, well, this is actually quite useful in the banking context. I was talking with some of the Barclays people who are here tonight. We met every Monday over at the accelerator in the East End, and we said, this is some useful stuff. How do we actually put it together? Then one day, on May 17th, a self-described Bitcoin millionaire put a $100,000 bounty on Reddit, and he said, I will give 100 grand in Bitcoin, of course, to the team or individual who can build a software platform that's capable of replicating the Bitcoin Foundation, which is a trade association in the United States. So 25 people, some of them may be watching this evening, but they know who they are, all got together on Skype that afternoon. We all started talking about it. Tyler opened a Google document, I added to it, Casey added to it, and then we all figured, a moment of clarity, we said, oh my God, we can actually do the thing. And so 1 month and not a lot of sleep later, as David Shearer, who's here tonight, can attest because I nearly fell asleep in his lap while going over a loan agreement on a particular deal we were working on in June. We created Eris 0.1. And what Eris 0.1 was, it was a system based on a smart contract kernel with about 30 different variables in it, which was designed as a rough sketch to replicate the functions of a 501c6 nonprofit organization. And we did it in 30 days. Now, we came in second place in the bounty, which was disappointing. But as my mother says, not all bad comes to harm you. 4 days later, at 1:30 in the morning UK time, 2:30 in the morning Geneva time, a guy we'd never heard of before named Sean Park sent us an email. And he said, I've just read your white paper twice. I'm going to say the long story, but, and here we are today. So that's that. That's the story of Eris Industries, very briefly, between the moment when we were just a bunch of guys who really were very passionate about cryptographic technology and cryptocurrency to a limited company and actually running a business. But I know you're all here to hear about what we've actually done most recently. So I'm going to step aside, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, my co-founder, and Chief Executive Officer of Eris Industries, Casey Coleman.
Thank you, Preston. Can everyone hear me all right? And thanks to the Rainmaker Law for allowing us to hold this event here this evening, especially in the holiday season where it was quite difficult to find a venue. So we were very pleased that we were able to be here tonight to host everybody. As Preston said, my name is Casey Coleman. I'm responsible for all the things that go wrong with Eris Industries. And I'd like to talk to you tonight a little bit about what we are trying to do with Eris Industries. We're a very young company. We don't have a lot of history behind us, and we're dealing with software which is, for the most part, highly experimental. But we think that we have some interesting hypotheses. And so mostly tonight, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what these hypotheses are. Our idea with Eris Industries is to empower developers to really embrace what we call participatory architecture by using distributed systems and smart contracts. And what that means is participatory architecture is an idea of how to develop software that it makes user, or it asks users, sorry, to participate in the scaling of the application, either by participating in the data security and data management of the application, or in participating in the distribution of the content that is included in that application. Now, the background of how we came to this idea was that probably this guy is familiar to everybody. The internet, as it currently works, has incentives which are awkward, to be honest. As a lawyer, I generally look at incentives more than anything else. And the incentives for application developers who are trying to make interactive applications at this time are really to hoard people's data. Really, if you have an expectation that you are going to be providing a free service to people, and those people are going to, want something useful from you, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, if you have the idea that your service providers, the people that you're getting services from, are not going to be giving you those services for free, maybe those are servers that you're leasing, or other systems, bandwidth, and storage. Those don't come free to application developers. But if there's no other way to make money other than to hoard people's data, repackage that in a system so that is better than your competitors, and sell that to advertisers, I mean, there's no other business model currently that exists for application developers if they are trying to provide free services. So the idea of participatory architecture is that developers maybe have another way to somehow reduce some of their costs by allowing their community or their users to participate in the scaling that will be required for that application. But how do you do that if you don't have servers? Well, you need to have a peer-to-peer database system, because most interactive applications rely upon having a state of data which is agreed between all of the users of the application. And for our money, at this point in time, the blockchain, as people sometimes call it, or as I tend to call it, the distributed database, is probably the best architecture that we currently have. So what we have done is we have built a blockchain which was derived from another blockchain, just as that blockchain was derived from another blockchain, just as other ideas came before that blockchain, and on down the road. Our blockchain is called Thelonious. Thelonious is smart contract enabled and smart contract controlled. And what I mean by that is that a blockchain is a particular database in that the way that it manages that security and consensus for that database is based upon an algorithm which is designed predominantly like to be applied for a gigantic music festival. It's designed to be completely public. It's designed to be completely transactional for anyone that can afford to get into the music festival. And obviously, it's also designed to withstand a little bit of tension that might come during the tunes. And that's very interesting. I think that's a really interesting idea. So what we have done is we've taken a step back and we've said not every concert I've ever been to is that or is that. Some concerts I've been to have been quite small and they have been quite intimate. And some concerts I've been to have been medium size. And there's a whole spectrum of concerts that are quite interesting, but that are not big music festivals. So what we have done is we've taken the consensus mechanism, which in most blockchain clients is hard-coded into the client itself. And instead of doing that, we've put it into the database itself. So if I could take a step back for a brief minute, how many databases work is that they have tiered levels of permissions. So those tiered permissions start with the root user of the database. That user gives permission to either write to the database or do other things with the database to other users or to tables or to other data structures within there. And this is what we have done with the Genesis DUG as Preston was talking about. We've put these parameters into the Genesis block of the smart contract enabled blockchain. And what that does effectively is it allows you as an application designer to build a database which actually makes sense for you, for whatever parameters the application that you're designing makes sense. A lot of times right now, what has been happening within the distributed computing technology area is that people have been trying to latch on applications to databases that may not have been designed for them. And what we said is that is fine, definitely try if that's what you want to do. But we want to open up the space for innovation so that people can experiment with other ideas and with other ways of building distributed databases that might make sense for what they have going on. And so this is the idea that we're going for with Thelonious. And Thelonious, as I said, is smart contract enabled. Now, what smart contracts are simply computable scripts that run in a distributed virtual machine that is married to a distributed database. Now, what that means is, in effect, is that everyone who is participating in that network, each one of those individuals runs that script on their computers rather than having that script run on somebody else's computers. Now, in most interactive applications that operate today, what ends up happening is that you interact as a user, you interact with a server, and you may have some idea as to what that server is doing, but you don't know exactly what that server is doing. And what smart contracts really open up for people is this idea that you can verify what a script or what a storage or what the state of the data is, anything that that application is doing at a real base level, you can verify because you are also going through the computations if you are participating in the network. And this is a revolutionary concept, and the Ethereum project really took this to a new level, starting at the end of last year, roughly about a year ago. And like I say, we rely on some of the technology that they built, and we think that that is fantastic. Although we think that it could be used in other applications that don't require a fully public, very heavy blockchain. And so the other part of what we have going on is the idea of building distributed applications. Distributed applications at this point, most applications that have been built up till now that rely upon peer-to-peer technology, what they do is there's a monolith of an entire stack that you have to adopt in order to get there. And I think what we're doing with Thelonious is really very interesting. But the other thing that we have going on is an application server that we call the D server. The D server is an application server for distributed applications. And while Thelonious is an iteration on existing technology, the D server has not been done before. And it makes it extraordinarily exciting, to me at least. Now, the D server, what it does is it modularizes peer-to-peer and distributed computing, and then it harmonizes that within a JavaScript layer and serves web applications. Now, the D server is meant to run on users' computers in the background, and what it does is it provides authenticated, harmonized, action-oriented interactions with distributed technology. Now, maybe that's a distributed file storage system or a distributed database system. Out of the box, as we released earlier today, it provides access to a fairly recent version of Ethereum. Thelonious, of course, given that it's the same company and we have synergies. And Bitcoin as well, 2 different flavors of Bitcoin, as well as a distributed file storage system called IPFS. And when you put these 2 systems together, harmonize them in a JavaScript layer, really, really interesting things start to happen. And what one thing that I think is very interesting about smart contracts generally and about distributed applications is what you can really do. So when you put these 2 things together, a distributed application server along with a distributed database that you can control, that is designed by you and for you, you start to realize the possibilities of having governance frameworks. And my background is in governance reform. That's what I've been doing for the last 10 years or so, predominantly in the Horn of Africa. And I'm very interested in how governance systems work. And I've also done a lot of small business oriented stuff there. And I've been very interested in corporate governance. So mostly that was the area that I did, either public-based governance or private-based governance in the corporate sector. And building governance systems is interesting, and there are very well-defined ways to interact with the world around us. But the pace of robotics, of automation, of the Internet of Things is very much speeding up. But our rulemaking frameworks are not speeding up as well. And this is where I think we're going to have very, very interesting problems in the future. And from my perspective, smart contracts, because they're completely verifiable and completely transparent, and because they are meant to run in a distributed manner, may be our best idea on how to tell the self-driving cars that they cannot park on Main Street this weekend because we're having a parade or we're having a race. And this is where I think that, at least from my money, I'm very interested in what we have going on. Like I said, we've tried to make it as easy as possible for distributed application makers to build applications. You can build your own database. We think we have tutorials that have been built for you. We have built this in a way so that you as an application developer should be able to rely on the tools that you know, like JavaScript, like HTML, like CSS. And the reason that we like JavaScript is even that guy can program it. So that's what we have going on, and I thank everybody for coming here tonight. And please enjoy drinks. And if you would like to ask any questions before I close officially, I'd like to introduce the team that we have. I guess this is the point in the concert before the final song when I'm supposed to introduce the band. So on lead guitar back there is Ethan Buckman. Ethan has more or less built Thelonious, and he is our expert on distributed database systems. On bass over here is Andreas Olesen. Andreas has built the D server. He's in charge of integrations for us at this point. He's also a well-known dApp maker within the Ethereum community. He is responsible for Product. If anyone remembers those beautiful, beautiful videos that he made. On lead vocals is Preston Byrne over here. Unfortunately, Tyler was not able to be here. Tyler Jackson, he plays drums for the band, but we had to pipe him in this evening. He's also in charge of smart contract design for Eris Industries. I'm Casey, and I play the tambourine. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to grab any of us or just drink. Either one.
Yeah. I don't know how I ended up with a cacophony of drinks.
So hello.
Hello. Yes, we're online. Actually, should I? Let's just do this. So, how do you feel it went, man?
Yeah, I think it went well. I mean, I think that the camera.
Hello, Internet. I'm back. Did you miss me? This is Chris Ellis, World Crypto Network. And
I am back.
We are here with
Hi,
Preston Byrne. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm really well. I think that all went well. It's a very accurate description, a representation of what the project is like. We're pretty straight up guys.
Nice one.
Thank you very much. This is like 5 minutes on the internet.
Tell us about. I want to know about the Marmot thing, because you made some really cool pictures for us on Twitter in the last couple of weeks about the Marmot.
That's a company emblem, Doug, the smart contract kernel.
Okay.
So basically, Doug is this smart contract kernel that lives in the Genesis block.
Mm-hmm.
And when Tyler and I were originally talking about, he's a quantum mathematician. So originally we started talking about quantum mechanics and things like that. And when he was explaining a concept, we basically used the analogy of trying to give a cookie to a marmot.
Right.
And so the information was represented by the cookie, and then what happened in transit was what happened to that cookie before it received its recipient, which was the marmot.
Right.
That then spun wildly out of control because I have a population of marmots that lives in my front yard back in America at my parents' place. And so, hey, Dad, why don't you go over there for a little bit? Nice, cool. So you would just need 2 minutes. You're on the internet. So.
Don't have any confidential conversations that were live on air.
So basically that spun wildly out of control, and then we decided to make Doug a marmot because that was really a good way of personifying what. Or creating a symbol which represented what the thing was. Because if you say to someone, what is it? Well, it's a smart contract kernel that da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's kind of an in-joke of the company. You know, we're quite happy for people to repost it and make stickers of it, or God knows what else they want to do.
So what did you mean when you said the other day that the marmot is the contract? Could you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So basically when you're working with smart contracts, the same rules don't apply. Instead of having tokens representing information and value, what happens is the contract stores, it has two roles, both first-class citizen on the database and as the store of the data itself within the overall system, which is governed by the kernel. So if you wanted to put something on the database and say this is a marmot, or rather we had sort of a test that we jokingly used, which is the marmot test, which is if you want to put a real live marmot and trade it on a blockchain, if you can accomplish that, then what you have is the holy grail of blockchain technology. You have a real asset. And there are two dimensions to that. The first dimension is that you need a legal entity involved, because otherwise it's very hard to incorporate, if possible at all, to incorporate legal certainty and enforceability into the thing. The second element of that is that the smart contract in its capacity as a database and an actor is in fact the asset itself which lives in the blockchain. So in a sense, you put this script on the blockchain, that script interacts with users in a certain way. If you are entitled to that asset, you're able to then instruct that asset with your key that you wanted to change its parameters to move that asset to somebody else. So if you see party A has marmot and party B has dollars, what would actually happen when you're moving those things around is a token would move. You would just simply have the respective entitlements on each of those databases, which are part of the system, amend themselves to reflect that certain key pairs have certain new write permissions in respect to those components.
Okay, I see. So the marmot itself, nothing's innovating within the marmot.
The marmot, you're not actually taking a marmot and putting it on a blockchain. What we're doing is you have a database which is operated by someone against whom certain rights and obligations can be enforced in respect of the administration of that database. You then reflect in the agreement between the users and the operator of the database, if you use a database in this way, this is what it's going to do. And then what you can do is you can bring that marmot to the operator of the database, deposit the marmot with them, and then the marmot effectively becomes, or rather the contract itself, is a digital representation of the real obligation. And this is something which is done every day, particularly with securities depositories, where you don't actually hold the security, you hold an abstraction of it. You hold a proportional entitlement to the security which is held in full by the entity which runs and administers that particular database. And you're insulated for the most part from those kinds of entities will generally be insolvency, or rather there's insolvency remoteness built in. So if they go bankrupt, those assets will still be turned over to you. So we looked at that and we said, well, a blockchain would be a really good solution for that kind of a problem. Even though you have a trusted third party who's administering the database, the likelihood that that trusted third party would engage in misfeasance and get away with it is close to zero. And even then, your exposure to it because of legal regimes already in existence is next to zero. So it's an ideal solution for just putting in a more efficient database. That was our view.
Now, you said something really interesting on your blog earlier on today.
Yep.
You said that blockchains are a data structure, not a currency.
Yep.
That's a very powerful message. I've been trying to get it into people's minds, into their consciousness, every talk I ever do. Why do you think that just hasn't been catching on?
Because I don't know. As we were saying earlier, Vitalik's been saying it all year. Casey, Tyler, and I have been saying it for a very long time. I think it's hard. I think it's hard for people who got into Bitcoin, and that was their first rodeo when they were getting involved in finance and law and politics and various other things, to break from. I came into Bitcoin late, and so I was coming with a lot of preconceptions about the way the world worked. I then had to kind of figure out where it sat. And so there was a process of interacting with it. I did a lot of research with my former law firm on the subject, and tried to figure out how the thing works. When you deal with a fully distributed database, because of the fact that the database isn't controlled with anyone, they cannot really represent an obligation at base level. There's a very real question in the common law tradition as to whether a blockchain database like Bitcoin's can be owned, whether the private key can be owned, whether a Bitcoin can be owned, because if it's ownership, it has to have come from somewhere, but at the moment, it's really just entropy, and you have information, and in order to deal in that information, you have to layer rights on it, and those are property, but the information itself isn't. There's a case in England called Oxford and Moss, which says pure information is not capable of being property. So starting from that position, doing and really very, very basic stuff. If you register on the blockchain and you send a transaction to an address, and then you effectively have control over that address because you've given it to someone else who owns it. The law isn't really clear on it. So yeah, I started out very early on saying, how do you make it clearer? How do you structure the system to match the legal obligations and the legal rules? There are people in Bitcoin who aren't going to like that. They say it's a system unto itself, but
And I think the obvious reason why is because it's a currency that is very speculative in nature, and therefore you're invested in it being a currency first and foremost, and not, or
I disagree. I think some people are in it for I think people are invested not necessarily because of speculation, because of political motivations.
Okay. Yeah,
With which I can sympathize. I'm a libertarian, although if you talk to Stephanie Murphy, she might disagree.
Yeah, sure.
So, but no, I mean, I'm a libertarian and believe in free markets and human freedom, but I'm also very pragmatic, and so this is Eris is a pragmatic system. Pragmatism is at its core. It is designed to adapt to the needs of the person deploying it, not to the needs of the person who invented it. And I think that's what we're trying to do. Everyone should have access to an efficient, secure database technology which they can distribute and benefit from by. In most cases, current solutions require people to use a centralized. It isn't, and let's just come out and say it. Bitcoin is centralized. The minor collusion is not a theoretical, it's not a theoretical question. It's a fact of life. I won't say why, but anyone who's in the know will know. Other blockchains are centralized. They have centralized development teams. Most people don't take an interest in it. They are applications with application developers that are almost masquerading as being decentralized applications. So we looked at that situation and said, well, if that's the way that this thing is currently being used, then why don't we actually make a blockchain which makes sense within that framework? So right, well, application developers, here's a blockchain which is made for you instead of made for some other team of developers, and then you develop on top of the developers.
So it sort of sounds like you come up with an enterprise solution that takes the core technology of Bitcoin, and then you've kind of offered this to companies. My last question really is, are you trying?
It's for everyone.
Okay.
I mean, this is for anyone who wants a blockchain. We don't. The code is open source.
Yes.
You can use
It's on
it
GitHub right now.
Right. It's on GitHub right now. Go Eris Limited. Eris Industries GitHub. Anyone can use it for any purpose. Whatever they can imagine, they can use it for, and they don't have to pay us a dime to use it, and they never will. And that is the way that open source should work. So, and that's what we built. And there are reasons for doing that, because if you want to build a business on blockchain technology, you need to demonstrate the use cases. People who are going to do that are application developers by showing that by basically showing the viability of this technology. We know the demand is there. I've talked to half a dozen developers. I want to build stuff with blockchains. I just don't know how. This is for them, but by extension, it's for everyone else. No one now needs to ask for anyone else's permission.
Are you gonna hop on now?
So my last question is: are you raising any money? Is there a fundraiser going on here?
What, like a pre-sale?
Yeah, like a pre-sale.
No.
Where can I buy the? No,
what, Eris coin?
Seriously. Where are the magic beans?
Yeah, no.
Where can I get rich?
Someone was like, "So I'm going to put the Eris coin thread on Bitcoin Talk." I was like, "Dude, go yourself."
He clearly doesn't know what he's doing. You've missed the trick.
No.
With the whole marmot thing. That's a meme. That's like a next Doge.
I wrote a series of articles a while ago about a particular cryptocurrency project which shall remain nameless. And I referred to something called a bit marmot, and someone then went on Doge Party and created the bit marmot, and they were like, "Cool, have some bit marmot," and I was like, "That's great," but again, it illustrates some of the problem with a fully decentralized platform.
Yeah.
Unless that guy then took a deed and then hashed it into the blockchain, and then provided me with a copy saying a bit marmot is in fact an entitlement to a real live marmot,
right,
which is enforceable against me personally.
Yes.
That's it's very hard to get a real asset on it. So. But yeah, no, there's no coin. This is a developer platform, not a cryptocurrency.
Right.
And you can build a cryptocurrency, but I can't see why you want to be honest.
Preston, this has been great. I'd love to have you on the show next week sometime, so we can sit in a less noisy and more sober environment, and we can go through some of this stuff. I encourage everyone to go to the GitHub. I'll put the link in the description below. I was really impressed with some of those contracts markups that you've got on there, which I haven't seen before.
We're all on Reddit. It's our Eris Industries. So if you want to get a hold of us,
just pop onto the subreddit, and we will after we engage in a bit of refreshment. No doubt, trolling is probably good in about 3 or 4 hours, at which point we'll be suitably lubricated for the conversation.
Great.
But
Well, thanks very much for your time, and thanks for putting on such a great show.
Thank you very
Cheers. Thank you. Okay, everyone, that's it for this evening. I've been Chris Ellis. I'm going to keep being Chris Ellis as far as I'm aware. And this is actually, pleased to announce, this is my first kind of paid gig. Preston very kindly is going to make a donation of about £100 to help pay for my travel. So I'm still a journalist, don't worry, I'm not doing any PR. He said I can say whatever I want, I can slag him off. And so really, I just want to spend some time going through their code. I think they only launched it today. It's very similar to some of the things that I've been talking about over the last few months and some of the talks that I've been doing. I've been doing my own version of smart contracts using a very kind of dirty workaround using Git repos and proofofexistence.com. And so I'm going to look forward to doing that. So I do hope you join me next week. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Chris Ellis. You can also follow us on Twitter at the World Crypto Network. It's at World Crypto Net. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.